Aguleri is an ancient village on the banks of the Anambra River, a few miles from where it flows into the greater Niger River. Late 19th century visitors paid glowing tribute to the beauty of the area. The riverbanks were clad in the brightest green, giant cotton trees, slender palms, and lovely ferns in great variety. Gorgeous kingfishers flashing here and there in the evening golden sunshine. Aguleri was blessed with abundance, fertile and watered land. The villagers spent much of their time cultivating palm kernel, yam, and cassava farms, while also hunting abundant game in the dense tracts of buffalo grass. They fished, canoed, and swam for relaxation.
A good picture has to include consideration on the African traditional religion, because that was the religious context in which the people lived, from which they came, and it wasn't a religious void. It was a whole view on life. The people of this African traditional religion believed in God, one God, Creator, from whom life comes. They also believed in spirits, good spirits and bad spirits. The good spirits to be offered offerings, begging for favors. The bad spirit were also offered a type of joyless sacrifices, begging them, please leave us alone. Then the people believed in ancestors, their fathers and mothers who have died, who lived good lives. And they did offerings to them. It was the father of the family who was the link with the ancestors.
The Igbos are a very religious people. They have always believed that there is a supreme being who is responsible for all our actions. This big God is responsible for the seasons, the fruits they get from the farm. And therefore, there is need to express appreciation by offering him the best from their farms. In other words, they have always believed in a supreme being. So when the Reverend Fathers came to tell them that this is not the best way to that supreme being, no. So it was very easy for the Catholic faith to grow and flourish within that environment. So it was not a surprise that Tansi, the small Tansi that is, decided he was going to be a priest. Yeah.
Normally, this God Supreme had no shrine. It was much like St. Paul, the unknown God, except that in this case they knew him. There were names in his honor. God gave, God gives. My father's name, which his father gave him, was Arinze Chukwu, which means Deo Gracias. If it had not been because of God, this or that would not have happened. I don't know what happened at the time my father was born, but his father must have had a good reason. It is from this context that the people came. So when Christianity came, particularly as preached by the Catholic missionaries, it was like dawn to people who were looking for the light at 4 o'clock in the morning. What they were looking for, without knowing exactly how to do it, Christianity came and told them, there is sacrifice, but it will not now be a goat or a sheep or even a young man. It is the Son of God who came down from heaven and showed us how to offer himself in sacramental form, in the form of bread and wine, which become his body and blood.
Then the people also see a kind of difference between the Catholic evangelization and the Anglican evangelization, because the other was more colonial and tempted to be autocratic, dictating, following law. The police have to be there. And there's nothing our people feared that time as the police. There was nothing they feared that time as the police. Unlike the Catholic evangelization, it was much more of going to the people, convincing them, and the people, seeing the truth in what they are saying, followed them. So I think these are the main things why an Igbo man lives, but primarily is he wants God, even in the natural religion he was following. And when the revealed religion came, there was no alternative than to follow it, because it's a light. And it's the light they have been looking for. And they saw that light and followed it.
Aguleri, perhaps more than any other place, was the cradle of Igbo civilization. Early Christian missionaries were impressed by the fervor and sincerity with which traditional religion was practiced. On the 6th of December, 1885, a small party of Holy Ghost fathers and brothers reached the Niger port of Onitsha, the gateway of Igbo land. They were discouraged by the watery world they found there. The matter of their coming to Aguleri was later decided for them by the king of Aguleri, Onyekomeli Idigo. It was King Idigo who first invited the Catholic missionaries to establish a Christian presence in the villages comprising the Aguleri region. In 1890, the first missionary reached Aguleri, and in 1891, a permanent station was established in Idigo's village, Isiagulu, the first link in what was to become a whole chain of Catholic missions in the Anambra Valley. exactly at this point that we are now canoeing through that, according to the historians, the first French and Irish Holy Ghost missionary fathers of the Roman Catholic Church, as far back as 1817, brought the good news of Jesus Christ, the mercy of God, the beautiful truths of the Holy Roman Catholic Church, right here to Aguilera. They first arrived in Onitsha, which is to our left, and established a beachhead, as it were, in Onitsha. But from there, and especially Bishop Joseph Shanahan, venerable, someday hopefully he will be blessed, came with canoes here with his brother, priests, and as I am now in a canoe, and beached here at Aguilera, of course there was hardly any commercial activity then, and met what would eventually become the first convert to Catholicism, namely the future Joseph Idigo, the Eze or the king of the Aguileri peoples.
What made this man called Joseph Onyakomelo to be the first king in eastern Nigeria to be baptized? What made him? Is it his own effort or his own? I don't think so. It is the design of God. God saw him as a fitting person to be used. But the most important thing is that he is the architect of what we are seeing today, the conversion we are seeing in this area today. And by inference, our son becoming the first saint, I think, in West Africa. The early missionaries played a lot of role. Unlike what we see some people trying to do, to use force to convert people, the early missionaries were very loving.
So Christianity, with its teaching on charity, on generosity, on solidarity, found among the Igbos very fertile ground on which to plant the seed of the gospel, and then it found fertile soil on which to grow.
The missionaries brought them development, education. They were interested in their children. They were interested in their families. And they were interested in them in their compassion. So these things made the Igbo man to rethink following the traditional religion and accepting the truth in evangelization, the Catholic evangelization. But most importantly, I think, is the grace of God. The grace of God shown through these missionaries and the lifestyle of the mission. I emphasize again the lifestyle. There was something different from the colonial masters, and they followed it.
This is the typical Igbo tendency. You come, they watch you with skepticism, and once they are convinced, they follow you. There were other reasons why people would be converted at that time. Let us say the grown-up, the Idigo of Aguilera, king of the place, he must have seen in these white missionaries something to elevate his people. Not just association for prestige with a white man, but also the school. And those were the first beginnings of medical care for the people. So he must have seen all that. For a boy like Iwene Tansi, he was sent to school by his uncle, who was headmaster. Gradually through the school, he learned about Christianity. So the transition from one to the other was not something hurtful, not something rough. It was something under grace, smooth.
Later that year, Onyekomili Idigo was baptized into the Catholic Church, receiving the Christian name of Joseph. The missionaries described him as influential and devoted, and above all, eager to make Jesus known and loved.
As a boy, Michael Tansi was known for being diligent, hardworking, a good schoolboy, a good houseboy, the type we call boy. He was good, he worked hard, he was honest, he was obedient, he was chaste as a boy, and he was joyful. He was good at football. He did not go to Atlanta for World Cup, but he played as much as you could play at Aguilera. He prayed. There was once other boys were looking for him. They did not find him. Then they saw him finally in the church, in front of Blessed Sacrament, attentive, fixed, without moving, without looking backwards and forwards. He was praying. He was attentive to Jesus in the tabernacle. He was in union with God, even at that age. As a teacher, Father Tansi was known, that time Michael Tansi, school teacher, then headmaster. He was known to be dedicated. He looked for excellence from the children in the school. He was teaching them by word and example. He lived a simple life. He was not rich. We are told that as headmaster, he came to school without shoes. But when inspector was coming, he ran quickly and got shoes. As a teacher, he trained the children in sports. Only the best was good for Michael Tansi. Rightly did Professor Elizabeth O.C.S.O.A, writing his life, entitle it Entirely for God. Obviously, priests for me were distant figures, but I came nearer to him when my baptism was near. We had to go through the catechist, the station catechist at O.C.S.O.A, then the central parish catechist at Dunukofia, where he lived. Indeed, he was still building. He was living at Omono. That's when I first met him. And I saw him as a figure distant from me, small boy of 9, as a man of God, as one who celebrated the sacred mysteries. You could see that he believed in what he was celebrating. He was almost carried away to another world during Mass or Eucharistic benediction.
I was a young girl of about 11 or 12 in my village when I used to see Father Tan saying Mass at the altar. I used to admire him, the way he was saying Mass, partly because he's a black priest. And in my little way, I wanted to be like him when I grew up. He was kind and received me well in a fatherly way, and asked me whether I wrote application for sisterhood. I told him I did. And he asked me whether I really meant it. He asked me about my family background. I explained all to him, and he gave me his blessing.
He died when I was 8 years old. But he was our first parish priest, African parish priest in my hometown, Obunike. Obunike was then under Dunukofia Parish. And when Dunukofia Parish was created, my town did not join the parish immediately. My town was still attached to Aguleri. But when they saw the charisma of the person of Tansi, the way he was going about doing his work, they decided to join the parish. So they joined the parish a year after Obunike. So he was then my parish priest for a number of years before he left and returned to Aguleri. Tansi was, for me, a holy priest, a good parish priest. And he walked among my people and evangelized them very well. So from my childhood, I always wanted to live take his own type of spirituality. That is the first impression about dancing.
When he was doing his probation at Umulumbe people up till today in Enugu will not forget him. That is why the Cistercian monastery in Enugu was built there. They said he will trek 25 miles to go and see a widow. Then he was in his probation. Wasn't a priest then. So all these things he did many of them as a layman. And all of us can do it. That is why he's our model. He knows that some people come to market, they don't sell anything. So what he does, the little money given to him, he will buy from several people so that many, many people will get.
We are influenced by other people. So divine providence uses other people to influence us. And there's nothing like a model in front of you. We were not given lectures about going to seminary. But Blessed Father Tansi was himself, his life was more powerful than a university lecture on the seminary. So, just by seeing this man, see him say Mass, hear him preach, go to confession to him, see him ride a bicycle, visit the sick from town to town, it was actual grace, definitely. So divine providence used it. Are we surprised that there are many priestly and religious vocations in the areas where he worked because of that type of man? As I would put it, unless you have fire, you cannot inspire. But if you have fire, then you can inspire. Anybody sitting near fire, there is no question of indifference. You will catch the heat.
Many things strike me about the blessed Cyprian Michael Iwene Tansi. His prayer life, his total dedication to God, his devotion to duty, his selflessness, his outpouring of himself in charitable works, his desire to see a formidable local faith-filled community built up. For example, his focus on building up good Catholic families, setting apart a place for the training of would-be mothers. His emphasis on the youth. His was among the first boarding schools we ever had in this part of the country.
That was in 1945. Not just myself, because he had a boarding house for the boys who were doing the last 2 years of the elementary school, Standard 5 and Standard 6. They had to live in the boarding house from Sunday evening till Friday afternoon. They went home, went to farm with their parents on Saturday. Sunday evening they came back and they lived there. They cooked for themselves as best they could. He read to them spiritual reading every day after lunch from Dominic Savio. We remember that. Then he would ring the bell to get up, something like 5:15 in the morning. He would come where we were sleeping and say, May Jesus Christ be praised in Igbo. When we, school children in Umudioka, were needing mud for making blocks, we didn't have enough money for cement to have cement blocks. So we had blocks made of mud. And this mud was, you bring a lot of water and bring clay, you pour the water, and you dance on the clay with the water so that the mud gets softer. And when it is strong and soft enough, it is put in molds. And that's how we made blocks. And with those blocks, the school was built.
Fantas, Olu, Ndo, Obe, Ndu man, and the Biaso. O were nnukwu oge ka wee convince ya ndị bebe na oyechi fada. Nyewa na onwe the bench nya ya oyechi fada. At the age of between 5 and 6. Where do the time dunya biga mwe na nwunye o meri debeli na ndị bebe achọrọ ka ochie fada chi convince ya na kawa ọkwado o ochie fada ọ bụ na uche chukwu ọ nwere ka ije emekata wee ekwe ya o nwere ọ bụrụ ala uche chukwu ọ chọrọ ọ na-eme ogige dị ime ife chukwu oge ọbụla ya ka o ji wee chi fada wee mechasị ihe niile agba mmechasị ọbụla ọbụrụ na ọ bụrụ uche mmadụ na uche chukwu awara afọ ewe chi.
To help the women more, he established a marriage training center, or you call it social center, or you call it, now we call it here, a marriage course. But that was not only marriage course, because it was a center where the pagan girls were taught how to keep themselves clean, how to cook, how to keep the house, all about house keeping. And not only that, they were taught, prepared for the sacraments of baptism, penance, and Holy Communion.
The sacredness of marriage cannot change. Blessed Tansi saw it, encouraged them to sacramental marriages, encouraged men to love their wife. Do you know Blessed Tansi was the person who told men, you don't call your wife when you're your property. Call her her name. If her name is Teresa, call her name. Because it's part of you, not your property. And I always tell them that he's one of the first person who tried to emancipate us.
The girls were being intimidated, and he was fighting for their liberation and helping them to practice their religion. The widows were getting awful treatment. He was on their side. Even the family, he was visiting families, those that have family problem. He used to go and settle them. He was doing home visitation.
And of course, when he preached, he was like a flaming sword. No one could say, I don't remember what he said. No, we remembered what he said. Some still remember some phrases from what he said because of the sincerity, clarity, also fire in his words.
Your confessions. I'm afraid of how you make your confessions. Agularians, your communion. I'm afraid. Agularians, so many things about you. So he gave preachings that fills the heart, that makes you happy, and then encourages you towards perfection. You see, that was why he was telling them, no, don't do this. Come this side. to perfect your life and then prepare it for heaven.
He did not spare people. When he sees people doing anything bad, he would tell them he would correct them in a fatherly way so that they will change. He lived his life as a perfect priest. When you see him, you know that you have really met a holy man, a man of God, somebody that has dedicated himself, his whole life to the service of God and helping humanity. As I said, not only helping them to be holy or to go to church or become Christians, but even to be real human beings. He was helping them in every way to earn their living.
Tansi showed the spirit of detachment. So when we have all these things around us, we should learn how to forgo some of these things, even to come to a level of ordinary people. As Prophet will also tell us that if you are a shepherd, you must be smelling like a sheep. You have that smell. If you don't have it, then something is wrong. So Tansi lived among the people, reach their own level. That's every place should aspire to live the way Tansi lived among the people. Help people. Yes, deep inside the pocket to help people. If every last kobo he used to help people. That every place should learn even today. Some don't do. Some do.
I find in him a normal priest. Because quite often when we use the name or the qualification saint, we tend to give the impression that that person is so detached that we cannot emulate him. But Cyprian, Iwene Tansi, Michael Iwene Tansi, was a normal priest. He was ordained a normal priest, like any of us was ordained. And he had his normal ministry in the parish and grew in his ministry. That is the point I want to underline. The fact of his growing in the ministry, the fact of his letting himself being drawn gradually by God towards his goodness. I avoid the word sanctity, but it frightens sometimes because it almost gives you the impression that it's something unattainable, something for a select few. So I prefer the word goodness, which is also another transcendent quality, attribute of God. And if a person attains full goodness, the person attains also sanctity.
Even my mom was one of the beneficiaries. He collected so many women, Umu Maria, and housed them, training them to become good housewives. Not only prayers, he was telling them, showing them how to cook. He was showing them how to walk.
We did not know when he went to bed because he was awake when we went to bed and he was awake when we woke up in the morning. How much time then he spent at night in the chapel and how much time in bed, I don't know. But he was a man of prayer. Moreover, he was ascetical, the type that I would admire, but I would not imitate. He ate very little. His cook had not much work. But when he had visitors, he made them happy. He gave them nice things. He was not rich, but he was clean, tidy.
I prefer using the word goodness. He allowed himself to be attracted to God by God towards fuller realization of this goodness of God in his life. First as a young priest, fulfilling his work or doing his work well as a young priest. And then at a time, he felt he needed a greater self-donation, complete donation of himself to the Lord. A total detachment, but not detachment in the sense of running away from the world, but a detachment of offering himself fully to God in order to be there as a sacrifice offered to God to the benefit of his own people and of the world, which is what Pope Francis keeps hammering on since he came to the pontificate. going outside oneself, giving yourself totally, focusing outside yourself instead of focusing within yourself and yourself alone, which is the expression of primordial paganism. Paganism is extreme egoism, which breeds ethnocentricity, which breeds what we call tribalism. But if we are able to go beyond this self centeredness and move towards going outside ourselves, self donation to the benefit of the wider community, then we are going to find the example of Michael Iwene Tansi.
Being a parish priest of where Father Tans worked, I think it's a rare privilege. But when I came in here, I was told that Father Tans lived where I'm living now. Yeah. And I said, wow, am I not blessed? I'm blessed. Walking where Father Tans walked is a wonderful experience because you meet people who met him, people who knew him, people he taught their lives, those he preached to, and they say wonderful things about him, and you can't just but enjoy that, and then telling yourself, this man did a lot of good works. And then you go to the villages, you hear people talk about Father Tans, what he did, and you encourage. And then you feel, let us do more to be like Father Tans. Let us preach more to be like Father Tans. Let us continue what he started. And I think it's part of what is motivating a lot of people. And he's a good exemplary priest which has touched so many people here. And we keep on looking up to him, waiting when the church will declare message.
We were not surprised in Dunukofia when he went to the monastery. Many people said, we knew something like that would happen because he prayed a lot. He was reading Dom Marmion, Christ, the Ideal of a Monk. I don't know how I knew, but I knew he was reading the book when he was in Dunukofia as parish priest.
Father Cyprian came in 1950 and I entered the monastery in 1954. So Cyprian was here 4 years, senior to myself. But he wasn't too sure whether Cyprian was going to stay here as a monk. And so after 2 years, he'd finished his novitiate and made his profession. And that's how I knew him. He was a professed monk in simple vows.
He went to the monastery without knowing anything about monastic life. So, any person listening to that story is interesting that from his background, from traditional religion, from the people who want to serve God, they want to give themselves entirely to God. Now, Tansi saw this, and this is what he entered the seminary for. This is what he has been praying for. That attitude, that turning to God entirely, is very attractive to priests.
For the next 10 years, I lived with Cyprian, got to know him on a daily level, and the last 3 years of his life, we worked together in the garden. And that's where I came to know him very, very closely. And I got to know all about his background, his life in Nigeria, and the love he had for the people. He was very, very dedicated to the whole Cistercian life. He was very, very thorough in everything he did. He was a small priest like myself. I think that's why we got on so well together. And he used to ask me a lot of questions, and I used to be able to tell him about my life in England. He told me about his life in Nigeria, about the school, studies. He found it very difficult. It was all done in Latin. He wasn't a great scholar, but he had a great application. He could really get down to things and study hard. It didn't come easy for him. Of course, he was ordained, he was a wonderful priest out in Nigeria, but he had this great desire to have further his own spiritual life and the life of the people, the life of the church. And that's where the monastic ideal came to mind.
God called him that early time so that he can be the foundation of this monastic way of life in Nigeria. You can see the type of vocation we are having here. Probably it's Father Tansi's doing, calling on them, beckoning on them to come and witness this new way of life and to embrace it. Many say that, many thought that we Africans can't live it. But to my surprise, you see that as Dom Ambrose, our late Dom Ambrose, so they said, it seems that we are all quite religious and we are called especially to live this monastic life. A solitude life, a quiet life, a conducive environment where he can contact with his God and pray efficiently. Pray not so much vocally, but have direct contact and meditate effectively. Here in Africa, we have that grace which Europeans had before. They have many vocations before, and I can say that this is our time. Father Tansi, he is that mirror that shows us what we can be if we want to, that we can live the life.
His health wasn't too strong at the time. He'd worked all his monastic life inside, in bookbinding and in the refectory, and they thought a change would help him, especially if he was going to work outside. The fresh air would help him, and that's where he came to the garden to help me. And that's where I got to know him better, because we could talk day by day, get to know each other very well. I had a great admiration for him. One little thing I like to tell, because I mentioned it to the tribune who came here before the beatification, but they didn't think that it was a good thing to bring it to the fore. Because when Nigeria got its independence, I congratulated Mark and Cyprian. Everything was going to go well in Nigeria. Everything was in place for them. They got a good education system going, finance was organised, the legal system was organised, universities, hospitals organised, and everything was going well. But Cyprian doubted that. He said, no. And I wonder what he meant really. But it came true that when the Balkan War came, they lost everything. And Cyprian almost foresaw that. He was very sad for his people because he realised that he wouldn't be going back with them to meet them again, but he certainly had a foretaste of what was going to lie ahead for them.
I went to look for books for my thesis. I was writing a doctoral thesis on sacrifice in Igbo traditional religion as an introduction to the Christian sacrifice. So I spent about 2 months in London. I made out time to go to Mount St. Bernard, and there I insisted I would serve his mass. In those days, concelebration was not the usual thing. So each monk, priest, said the mass in a small chapel, a small altar, and then side altar. And then there was the big community mass together, where one person said mass. So I served his mass, and of course I had opportunity to speak with him. They didn't talk to one another, they made signs, but they were allowed to talk to a visitor. I found him the same calm and peaceful person that we ever knew. Obviously, the monastery made him even more calm.
He told me about Aguilera when he was parish priest with Father Mark. And Father Mark came and joined him 2 years later. We had 2 Nigerian monks here. We were hoping to make a foundation in Nigeria, but we couldn't find a suitable site, and we hadn't got the money to make the foundation at the time. And Father Luke, who went out, came back disappointed that he couldn't find a suitable place. But on the way back he met a Father or missionary bishop, Bishop Peters. He was a Milkill missionary bishop, and he told me his story and said, well, I can get you a piece of land in the Cameroons, which borders Nigeria. And when Father Luke told the community, it was understandable that Cyprian and Mark were very disappointed. They were hoping that the new monastery would be founded in their own country. But again, you see, the Lord works in so different mysterious ways, because the foundation of Bamenda went ahead. Cyprian was going to be novice master at the new monastery, and the first party went out, and Bamenda came to be the first African monastery from Mount St. Bernard.
Blessed Tansi worked hard, not only to live the life as a monk or to die saintly, but he desired that this noble way of life, this contemplative way of life, cessation life, will be brought home to his hometown in this very country, Nigeria. And as you said, it's unfortunately that he died before the time. But I will say today, his dream is realized in our lives, since we are the great daughter house of this very monastery of Mount St. Bernard, which he dreamed to bring to Nigeria. And as God may have it, this very monastery is situated close to this very Aguleri you are talking about, his hometown. So it's a fulfillment of his dream. And I think wherever he may be in heaven, he must be a fulfilled man. He must be happy that he has actualized what he has sent to do in Mount St. Bernard.
The abbot sent me a telegram. In those days, there was no cell phone. So he sent me a telegram. Father Tansi has died. The burial is in 2 days' time. So I got some Nigerian students with me in London, a few more in Leicester, and we were there. We took a train and then a bus. So we made it. We reached about an hour before the funeral mass in the monastery. Obviously, it is like a person told, your father is dead. The person is a bit disoriented. My father is dead. My guide, the one I look up to. On the other hand, knowing that he was a very holy man, I didn't have much doubt where he would end up after death. I knew he would, if anybody would go to heaven, it has to be Father Tansi. He has to be there. So it was that mixture of sadness, desolation, and also Christian hope. So that it wasn't all tears the whole way. I knew his health was not the best. There was no coffin. It was a simple makeshift rafter in which the body was wrapped. I was struck by the radical poverty, simplicity of the burial, full of faith, but full of simplicity, the very opposite of extravagance.
The enthusiasm of Nigerians, especially among the Igbos, for the return of the relics was much, which led Archbishop Stephen Ezanya, then the Archbishop of Onitsha, to request Vatican for the exhumation of the body of Blessed Tansi. And that was granted. And the exhumation itself started on the 12th of September, 1986 in England. This was done by the monks of St. Bernard. They were very kind. They did everything. They provided all the facilities. The same day the exhumation started, the body was pulled out. It was pulled out in a mud of water because they told us that the day he was buried, they made water and just dropped the body there. That time, the monks were not being buried with coffin. He was lying only on a board, a plank. Body was not intact. What we found was the essential bones that remained. The skull was still almost intact. As I said, all the bones were recovered. They were treated, and the treatment took about 3 days. On the last day he was leaving, the monks gathered and gave him a welfare send-off. They had a mass in which more than 100 priests attended, including the Bishop of Nottingham, who was there, and the 3 bishops that went for the exhumation from Nigeria, Bishop of Biafra, Bishop Ezanya, and Bishop Brian Osangan of Calabar. They were all there. Then the body was flown back on the British Airways and landed in Lagos, where he stayed for another 27 days for the reasons he cannot continue to Onitsha immediately. And I think that's the march.
Blessed Father Michael Tansi, pray for us. Blessed Mother Teresa of Calcutta, pray for us. Blessed Pope Pius XII.
You see the Supreme Pontiff, the head of billions of Catholics, taken off from his cathedral in Rome to come to Aguilera. It's incredible. It's incredible.
Joy, peace, a dream fulfilled, as if it was not real, and it was real. I knew that the president of Nigeria had invited the Pope and the bishops of Nigeria. I was not indifferent to John Paul II, now Saint, deciding to make the sacrifice, and his health was not tip-top at that time, but he decided to do it. The Holy Father considered, if he did it in Rome, how many Nigerians could pay their way? If he did in Nigeria, he might get 1 or 2 million people, and so it was. The Pope was doing a great favor to our country. For me, it was also a great privilege to be included among those who accompanied the Holy Father.
The second visit of the Holy Father, Pope John Paul II, was just to come to beatify Father Tansi for no other reason. It was why he came. And that was really wonderful. Over 2 million people attended the Beatification Ceremony at Oba. And that was a big expression, really, that the people liked Father Tansi and they were interested in him. More particularly, that the message he was bringing to them was primarily evangelization. Since then, in Nigeria today, the becoming a saint has been a popular phrase, which was never there before.
22nd of March, 1998 is a day all Nigerians will forever remember. The day the Vicar of Christ, now St. John Paul II, paid us a second visit. The day we realize that one of us is also in heaven. The day we saw over 2 million people gathered in one place, the highest number of ever in Nigeria. The day people parked their cars 5 miles away and walked. If you see people walking that day, you know that it is good to be a Catholic. You see men and women carrying water, carrying everything, and we got there and everybody stood. It was 9 o'clock.
I was not in Oba. I was in Rome. But in Rome, we were being interviewed in different ways. So we were supplying background information of what was going on in Nigeria. That's what the part I played.
First of all, I must say that it's a thing of joy that one of us, a black Nigerian, and in fact an Igbo, is now a blessed. And he lived this monastic life to the fullest. It's a thing of blessing, it's a thing of joy.
And an encouragement to all of us who are the monastics of today, that we can make the life is possible, we can persevere as monks, and we can live it to the fullest, to the glory of God. And that is what encourages me all the most, that one of us made it, and I know I can make it.
It is better seen than described, because there was no space. Even myself and my people who were going could not get there. A distance that will only take you about 30 minutes. We spent almost 4 hours trying to, because we left very early. And we were trapped by human traffic, not even a vehicle, because there's no vehicle moving, except those, the important people of whom I'm humbly allowed to pass that day. Eventually, we managed to get to the podium. And when we got there, I was privileged to be on the upper podium, close to the main altar. Then came the helicopter carrying our wonderful Pope, Blessed John Paul II. When he came, our band was bound to usher him into the altar. That was combining tradition with religion in the best of interest of humanity. So that was the biggest privilege my band and myself would consider in this world, because the Pope allowed my kingly band to lead him round the altar before the mass started.
I tell you one thing that I saw that shocked me. Papa Pedro Martin died just last month. I was near them. I was near him. He was very old in 1998. Was already nearly 90 years. He came. Immediately, the Vicar of Christ came out. Papa fell down, Papa Pedro Martin. He fell down on the ground and bowed and said, Gabi O.C.S.O.A. That's one thing I saw. Then the Pope came in. And these auxiliary cultural dancers came out to meet him with their beautiful pots, and then marched in the president of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria, Archbishop Obiefuna. It's indescribable. Everybody, all the media stations in Nigeria, everybody was there. It was a wonderful experience. At that time, the head of state of Nigeria was General Sani Abacha, and there was a lot of military people keeping watch. But we were allowed, myself and the Igwe of Aguleri, we were allowed to, and the traditional Okanga music, we were allowed to drive through to Oba. And then at Oba, we escorted the Pope, the Holy See. We escorted him to the altar. It was the best experience I've ever had.
I was not hungry on that day, because there is a type of spiritual joy which suppresses natural feeling of hunger. Like a priest on the day of his ordination, he is not worrying very much about what to eat or drink. There is the spirit which overpowers the body. Also the significance in terms of history, that here was the Vicar of Christ on the soil of Nigeria, declaring blessed a Nigerian citizen. It was also something shown by the whole nation, on the government side and also on the church side, obviously. The joy among the people, the enthusiasm, difficult to control, all that was part of the event. Going back to Rome, I felt almost like Simeon the prophet. Lord, you can now call me. I think that with my master in the headquarters, so declared, and God gave me the grace to live to see it, what else am I asking of the Lord? And this great help to our country, to Christians that everyone is called to be holy, and it is possible, it is very eloquent. The impact, only God will finally understand it.
One thing I always remember, that people around me were saying, so a black man can be a holy man.
It just goes to show that there was something special about Tansi to have attracted the Pope to Nigeria twice. And it's the fruit that we're reaping now. Because I know that before too long, I think he'll be canonized.
There are people who come almost every day telling me they received one favor or the other from the blessed Iwene Tansi. But among them, the most prominent was the miracle which we used for his beatification, which was a girl that had a tumor in the stomach, which could not be removed at the operation. And the doctor, instead of allowing the girl to die at the operation theater table, closed her up and sent her away to die. One sister, religious sister, who was living with this girl, brought her to Father Tansi. And suddenly, the day he was reburied in our niche, in this basilica where we are now, this girl down there at the Archbishop's house touched the remains of Father Tansi and was instantaneously healed. That is the most prominent.
The lady that received the miracle, I met her in person because they came to Rome to see the Pope. So I had time to eat with her and then to converse with her to see somebody who was about 2 weeks to die, now in this good form. So for me, many things about that made me not to just being proud, but giving thanks to God for what He's doing in our lives, for what He has done, using my own brother. I call because you use the word brother, my own brother, my fellow Nigerian. So there's place for us in heaven too. We have chance too. So that's my joy.
Italian Cistercian monk told me that Father Tansi will heal this woman and took her to Father Tansi's remains and prayed over her. The woman was healed. She is said today, living with the husband. There are many cases, small and big, that come, and go again. Many people come with reports of favors they received from Father Tansi.
Coming to the Basilica of the Most Holy Trinity, an icon of the Catholic Church throughout all of West Africa, actually. For it was here that the implantation of the seed of the Catholic Church was placed deep in the Igbo culture by Bishop Joseph Shanahan and his heroic Spiritan missionary brothers and sisters. Inside this basilica are housed the bodies of the former bishops of this archdiocese, starting with Bishop Shanahan himself. We will see him shortly on the floor, very close to the communion rail, and very close to the shrine of Blessed Tansy. And also the last two archbishops who are deceased and have been entombed next to Bishop Shanahan. Whereas Blessed Tansy has his own above ground shrine, which we will see shortly inside the basilica on the side altar next to the main high altar. So without any further ado, we move now from the plaza of Holy Trinity Catholic Church to the interior to give you a wide-angle view of the entire basilica from the rear of the church, where the mortal remains of Blessed Tansy can be seen lying in state in a gorgeous bronze coffin. So you're welcome to the Basilica of the Holy Trinity in Onitsha.
Whenever I enter this cathedral or Basilica of the Most Holy Trinity, Onitsha, I always kneel at his remains and pray, ask him for some favors to help me to live to be a happy religious. I want to be perfect as my Heavenly Father is perfect. So I say he's answering that my prayer, because wherever I have been, both in my community and other people's community, I get well with people.
When I pray to Blessed Tansy, my prayer is backed with a conviction that he's already with God. And as an intercessor, he can carry my petition to God. And there are things Blessed Tansy has been doing that ordinarily you wouldn't have considered possible. For example, we have the Tansy key holder. When the Reverend Father blessed that key holder, it converts to a sacramental. It commands spiritual potency. It becomes an article for devotion. It's been working wonders for us. How? If you're traveling and you're carrying that key holder, one, it prevents accidents. Two, if the accidents become inevitable, you must survive to tell the story. It's been happening regularly.
I admire the fact that many from outside Anambra State and even from outside Nigeria admire Blessed Tansy seemingly more than those inside. But I must confess that inside here, Blessed Tansy is a household name. People may not be building monuments or gathering here and there, but the name is solemn and sacred.
to everybody in this state and beyond.
This area is indeed a particularly holy ground because, as I said earlier, a holy man named Iwene Tansi, Father Iwene Tansi, Father Michael Cyprian Iwene Tansi, walked these very roads to baptize, to visit the people in the areas, not to socialize, but to bring them the comfort of the sacraments, to share with them also the poor and the needy, the little collections that he used to receive when he was parish priest. So you're welcome here at the access road to St. Joseph's Catholic Church, and I invite you now to follow me as we enter more intimately into the compound of St. Joseph's.
Anything happens in Aguleri, we say special prayers, believing that Tansi will clear the problem for us. So it's been spiritual. If you want to get anything done in Aguleri, Father, just mention Father Tansi's name. Just mention the way Catholicism has helped. That's why if you come to Aguleri, other faiths, other religious faiths are in insignificant minority. Everybody by the day, by the night, is becoming a Catholic, due to the power that Tansi wields in Aguleri. And personally, Father, when I pray a lot. When I pray, my father lived and died praying. So I pray a lot. And whenever I pray, I do two things uppermost. I beg Blessed Virgin Mary, and I beg Father Tansi to intercede for me to God. And anytime I call on those two people, it's magic. A lot of answered prayers.
I always remember the priest in my prayers. I ask Blessed Iwene Tansi to pray for them so that they will emulate his example of being good priests, holy priests, doing everything entirely for God.
We approach Tansi as a brother talking to a brother. And I'm so proud that I have one now in heaven. At least the church has testified that he is blessed. Often at Mass, I do call him during the consecration for his intercession and assistance so that we can live this life to the fullest. It's not so much a matter of beginning this life or to live it, but to persevere in this noble life. He's actually responding to that prayer. He's really interceding for all of us. I pray to him for help, for assistance, and to help me plead with God that we really yearn to be one with him and to make this heaven to his glory.
There was a family that we are living like cat and dogs. So I went to him. I told him that when he was alive, he was after the good of the families. And he answered me because they settled their misunderstanding and they are living in peace now with 5 children.
Whenever I want to take an important decision in my life, whenever I'm going for any important ministry, dedication of a church, as I've done for the nation, for confirmation, I begin by praying to Tansi. First of all, to guide me in my homily, and then to reach the heart of the people by what I tell them, to bring them nearer to God. And I think he has always granted me that favor, so that when I finish talking to the people, when I finish ministering, I feel that people go out away from that place with something. It is it's God doing the work, not myself, really, actually, because we just sow the seed. God makes the seed germinate. God makes the seed give fruit. But the little bit of my own work, I often invoke Tansi to ask for his guidance. Because actually, I want to keep him at the central part of my spirituality and my pastoral work. And so I don't lose focus of that. When I take my rosary to pray, my coat of arms will just show me about Tansi, entirely for God. So that guides me always.
Obedient to the call of the Master, be meek and humble and show love to all. You live your life for the sick and the suffering to save the soul to the glory of God. Oh, blessed Tansi.
To see people so warm in devotion to him in Lagos, in Ibadan, in Cameroon, Yaoundé, in Manfe, but also in faraway United States of America. I was invited 1 or 2 years after that to Los Angeles when Cardinal Mahoney was still Archbishop. They were inaugurating a wall painting of him in one of the parishes there. Granted, most of the people there were Nigerians, but they also had local people. And it is very, very encouraging. In England, too, there are groups who are devoted to this great man of God. All that helps us in our faith, that our faith is not a question of one village or the other. And holiness is attractive in itself. When Christ came into this world, he could not have come to every culture physically, but symbolically, he came to every creature, every people, every language, because he identified himself with humans in our nature. So he came for all of us. So following Christ encourages us. We are not in a village association. We are in a worldwide family, the new family of God, which is universal, which is Catholic, which is for all nations, cultures, languages, peoples, and times. What could be more encouraging than that?
This brings us to an examination of what our Catholic faith teaches us about the call to holiness. Our faith teaches that everyone is called to holiness or the perfection of charity. Holiness means love of God and love of neighbor to a very high degree, at advanced level. The Second Vatican Council says that there is a universal call to holiness. That means everyone, without exception, is called to a very high degree of love of God and love of neighbor. That means to a very high degree of holiness. It is a mistake, it is an error to think that holiness is for priests and sisters and reverend brothers and monks. But as for us in the family, we just manage. If we manage and get into heaven, squeeze in, then we are all right. Mistake. This is not correct theology at all. It is an error. It is not true. Everyone is called to holiness. Holiness does not depend on your state of life. That means, if you ask now, who is the holiest person in this church now? If you say, it is according to high position, so it will be cardinal, mistake. Error. If you say it is Reverend Father, we don't know. Reverend Sister, we don't know. The holiest person in this church may be a woman who has no seat even inside, who is outside now.